Welcome to the Explainer. You hear it everywhere, right? AI is getting better and better, exponentially fast. But what if for the real experts, it's actually making them slower? Today, we're going to dig into the data and solve this productivity puzzle.
All right, so let's get right into it. The headlines are screaming about AI's exponential growth. But here's the question. What happens when you take these amazing new tools and give them to the best of the best, the top experts in their field? Well, we're going to look at two studies today that are in total conflict, and they paint a really, really different picture of what's actually going on in the real world. So first, let's look at the hype side of the story, the evidence for AI's incredible, almost unbelievable growth. This all comes from a benchmark study by a research nonprofit called METR. And they have a really interesting way of measuring AI's abilities. It's not just about what it can do, but for how long it can stay on task.
Yeah, so instead of a simple, did it pass or fail, they use this metric called time horizon. It's pretty cool, actually. Imagine a task that takes a human expert 1 hour. If an AI can pull off a task of that same difficulty, get it right about half the time, then its time horizon is 1 hour. It's a really smart way to track how AI is handling more and more complex work.
And here's where it gets wild. When the researchers charted this time horizon for all the new AI models, they saw something, well, kind of shocking. On a log scale, the graph is a perfectly straight line going up. I mean, that's not just a trend. That's the textbook signature of perfect exponential growth. So the progress isn't just fast, it's also freakishly steady and predictable.
So just how fast are we talking? Well, the data shows that this time horizon for AI models is doubling every 6 to 7 months. Think about that. The complexity of tasks that AI can handle is doubling twice a year. I mean, based on this graph alone, you'd think we're on the cusp of, everything changing. But, and this is a big but, there's a catch.
And this right here is the heart of the matter. These benchmarks, they're basically run in a perfect sterile laboratory. The humans they're measured against are low context. Think of a super smart developer on their very first day on a new job. They don't know the history, the quirks, anything. The tasks themselves are neat and tidy, not the tangled out, messy problems you find in the real world. And what does success even mean here? It just means passing an automated test. That's it. Nobody's checking if the code is actually good or easy to maintain later. Okay, so to figure out what happens in that messy real world, a different group of researchers set up a completely different kind of experiment. This time, they wanted to see how AI affects the real pros, the high-context experts, the people who know their projects like the back of their hand. What they did was a classic randomized controlled trial. They found a group of absolutely elite developers, gave them actual tasks from their own GitHub issue trackers, so real work. And then, for each task, they flipped a coin. Heads, you get to use the latest AI coding tools. Tails, you don't. And then it just started a stopwatch to see how long each task took. And I need you to understand, we are not talking about your average coder here. These developers were working on huge, legendary open source projects. We're talking million-line code bases. On average, these folks were the number 3 top contributor out of hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. And they've been working on that one specific project for an average of 5 years. These aren't just experts, they're the world's leading authorities on these specific pieces of software. So, before they even started, other experts in the field predicted AI would make these programmers about 40% faster. The developers in the study, they were a bit more modest. They guessed maybe a 24% speed boost. So what was the actual result? They were 19% slower. Slower! It actually took them longer to do their work when they used the AI. This result was so unbelievable the researchers thought their experiment was broke.
So, what is going on here? How can both of these things be true? How can one study show perfect exponential growth while another shows that AI makes world-class experts worse at their jobs? Okay, let's unpack this puzzle.
The whole mystery really boils down to this. The two studies were measuring completely different universes. You had the benchmark study, which was testing a low-context person on a clean, simple problem where success was just passing a test. And then you had the real-world experiment, which tested a super high-context expert on a messy, complicated problem where success meant writing amazing code that actually works and can be merged back into the project. So why the slowdown? The researchers had a few big ideas. First, maybe just over-optimism. The developers bought into the hype and just tried using AI for stuff where it didn't really help. Then there's something they called the expertise penalty. Basically, these developers are so good, they already know the right answer instantly. For them, the hard part isn't thinking, it's just typing. And trying to explain what they want to an AI actually takes more time than just, typing it out themselves. And maybe the biggest one, the AI just wasn't reliable enough. All the time they saved was completely eaten up by having to double-check and fix the AI's mistakes. Yeah, just like Joel Becker from that first benchmark study said, the time you spend correcting the AI's work is a really big deal. For a top expert, you're not getting an assistant. You're becoming a manager for a kind of unreliable intern. And that's not a productivity boost. It's a whole new job that slows you down.
So what does this all mean? What's the real takeaway? How should we be thinking about AI's progress now?
Well, the researchers landed on this pretty mind-blowing conclusion. For an expert, someone who absolutely cannot afford to make a mistake and merge bad code, reliability is everything. It's the only thing that matters. For an AI tool to actually save them time, its suggestions would probably need to be right 95, maybe even 99% of the time. Anything less than that, and the mental overhead of checking its work just cancels out any benefit.
All right, so let's wrap up with the big takeaways. First, and this is huge, AI's effectiveness is totally dependent on the context. It's not a one-size-fits-all tool. Second, our current benchmarks, they're just not good at predicting how useful AI will be for high-skilled experts in the real world. Third, for those experts, reliability is way more important than just raw power or capability. And finally, the gap between the hype we see in benchmarks and the reality on the ground, well, it's pretty wide right now.
And that leaves us with a really important final thought. The goal here isn't to say AI is bad or to slow it down. It's about changing the direction. So the question is, how do we start building AI that doesn't just ace a test in a lab, but can actually earn the trust of the world's top experts, the people who are truly pushing the limits? That is the real puzzle we need to solve.